Right, and today's unpopular opinion, MDF is better than real timber. What do you think? So I know this one is going to irritate a lot of you, and I don't really care. Because if you think that MDF is no better or worse than real timber, I don't think you know what you're talking about. And the reason I say that is this. I understand if you live in the USA, beautiful country, you have access to a lot more timber than the rest of the world generally does. If you take the UK, for example, I've had people sit there and say, hey, shall I make my workbench with American black walnut? I would have to remortgage my house to make a workbench out of American black walnut. Now, I'm being a little bit facetious, but you get the point, right? It is ridiculously expensive, as is oak, as is birch, as is ash, as is any sort of hardwood. Not only are those timbers expensive, but they also come with issues. You know, timber wants to move, it wants to warp, it wants to twist. And do you know what MDF doesn't do? It doesn't warp, it doesn't twist. It's consistent in thickness and it comes as a sheet. Now, a lot of you might be saying, well, Josh, you know, MDF is terrible. It blows out. It's rubbish to paint. It's not particularly strong. You can't screw into the end grain. And to all of those comments, I would say, maybe. A lot of it depends on the type of MDF that you get, right? There's good MDF and there's bad MDF. There's moisture resistant MDF, there's tricoya, which is external grade MDF. I think very much it's a case of, you know, it's like using the right tool for the job. I think using MDF in certain situations is great, maybe not the best in other situations. Now, if I'm going to go make a whole bunch of kitchen cabinets and they're going to be sealed correctly and they're going to be nice and sorted and wonderful, I think MDF's a great option. Granted, you're going to have to paint it and you're going to have to seal it, but I don't really have a problem with that. If your argument is you shouldn't be using MDF in a wet environment, well, you shouldn't be using chipboard in a wet environment, and what are 90% of the kitchen is made out of out there? Now, yes, you can do birch ply kitchens, you can do beautifully machined, handcrafted kitchen carcassing units. I don't have a problem with that, but the vast majority of them usually are going to be chipboard. So I don't think there's any issue with making it out of MDF as long as you're going to seal it and encapsulate it correctly. If you're going to make an entertainment unit and it's going to be painted, why spend loads of money on timber when you can just use MDF? It's perfectly good for what you need. If you need a workbench top, do you know what? I watched this guy on YouTube and he said MDF, excellent material for workbench tops because it's consistent, it's stable, and it's nice and dense. I'll put a link in the description. You should definitely go and check his video. So what else do I think it's better at then? If I want to make some drawer units, I might use some MDF. If I want to make some fences for my machines, my auxiliary fences, I'm going to use MDF. If I want to make jigs, I'm going to use MDF. Now, a lot of people will sit there and they'll say you can't use it in an unheated workshop, you can't use it somewhere where there's moisture in the air, high humidity. I don't know if you noticed, I live in the UK and it rains about 99% of the time. Like, it has done nothing but absolutely hammer it down today, and I have a lot of MDF in the workshop and not all of it is sealed, and guess what? I don't have any problems with it. Yes, we do have heating of sorts in that I have a log burner. It's not a temperature controlled, humidity controlled environment. My CNC is made from MDF. Unsealed MDF at that. It sits in the corner. It's the furthest away from the log burner that you can get in this room. And I don't have any issues with it. It's not blown, it's not warped, it's not twisted. We have zero problem. Now, would it be nicer if it was made of steel or aluminium? Probably. But it isn't. I certainly wouldn't make a CNC out of real timber, something like walnut or oak. Now, it might be harder, but it's going to warp, it's going to twist, and it's going to move with the environment. The machine doesn't. Now, I can hear you say, Josh, you can't use it in wet environments. Well, I would beg to differ with that because you can use it in wet environments. You just need to use the correct one. You get moisture resistant MDF. For those that you don't know, that's the green stuff. You should check out some of my other videos. I talk about it in them. I'll drop a link in the description. There's tricoya, which is the exterior grade MDF. That stuff, I make external grade signs out of it. So something that's going to be outside in all of the elements, there's no problem. I even watched a guy who made a gate out of it. Now, a couple caveats with that is you need to edge seal the material correctly, but again, no problems at all. I understand you might have a varied opinion on that. You might think that I'm talking rubbish, but I do use these materials every day. I do know what I'm talking about. I don't really think that there's any need for timber if, like I said before, it's going to be painted. If you want a stained finish, if you want a beautiful desk, you want a beautiful entertainment unit, you want something that's going to look amazing, then by all means, use real timber. Stain it, varnish it, do whatever they want, oil it. But in reality, when you're talking like real world scenarios, people, clients especially, don't necessarily care whether it's made out of real wood or not. They don't care whether you use pocket holes, whether you use mortise and tenon. Man, they don't even care what paint you use. They literally have a brief of, hey, I want it to look like this, and this is how much money I have to spend, go get on with it. And that's where MDF comes into its own, really, because like I said, it doesn't warp, it doesn't twist. Take plywood, for example, right? I have some cheap pine ply here. These are going to be used for outhouses. And look at it. I don't know if you can see, but they're warped, and the warp wasn't in there originally. Now, the warp has come out because there's extra stresses and all these other bits and pieces of the material. I've cut it. It's allowed them to like pop. not something I ever have with MDF. Now, like you said, like Josh, would you make an outhouse with MDF? Well, probably not, but if I used Sequoia and I sealed it correctly, then yes, I would do. So I mentioned fences and jigs earlier on. If I'm gonna make a fence, right, I need that thing to be 100% flat. When I set my sled up, I do the 5-cut method, right? And I try and get it to within 0.02 of an inch, I think it is. Yeah, about 0.02 of an inch, which everyone laughs at me for, right? But you have to understand when we're doing production work and I cut 1,000 units out and I'm cutting them on my sled, if you knock all those 1,000 up next to each other and sit them there, you can run your hand over them, you can see which ones are a little bit out. So we have to have perfection. And this is where the MDF comes in, because it is consistently flat. You will not find a plywood that's consistently flat. Even birch ply, right? When I started out and we were doing a huge amount of birch ply work and I'm making my jigs and my sleds with birch ply, it was always an absolute pain because you might just get a little bit of movement in there. And with MDF, you don't get that. You might be screaming at the TV right now or at your phone and sitting there saying, look, oh man, the end grain is absolutely disgusting. It all flups up and goes horrible. Look, right? Again, that comes down to the type of MDF that you're using. Even discounting moisture resistant MDF and Sequoia and just looking at bog standard brown MDF, a couple that we use quite a lot in the UK are Caber MDF and Medite MDF, and I can tell you right now that Caber normally comes out cheaper, but it's not as nice as Medite. Medite sprays better, Caber's got more of a pronounced face grain on it. If I'm going to do any sort of machining, spraying, I always try and go for moisture resistant MDF because it just gives a better finish. There's less prep work, and I guess that's where it comes into it that we're a shop and we have to make money and time is money, and so everything's a bit of a trade-off. So we might spend more money on this side by buying the better material, but then that's going to save me hours of work in terms of prep before I spray a product. As with all my other videos, right, it's kind of like case-by-case basis. But as a general rule, I do think that MDF is an awesome material. I think there's lots of conditions where it's better than anything really, better than timber at least. And even in a wet environment, I'd be more inclined probably to go with a marine ply or an exterior grade ply or a birch than I would be with a proper timber. Now, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of joiners out there, chippies and like proper woodworkers, hobbyist woodworkers that would be screaming at the TV, telling me that I'm talking rubbish. That's absolutely fine. All I'm doing is I'm talking from my experience. We've been running this business for 10 years and we put a huge amount of time and effort into researching materials, into trying to see what works best. And in reality, a huge amount of what we can do is efficiency savings, and MDF creates a lot of efficiency savings if we use the right type for the right job. So that's my take on it, right? That's my hot take. I'm sure that will wind no end of you up, but I love it. I think it's great. Yes, there are issues with safety. If you're cutting MDF, make sure you're using dust extraction or you're doing it outside using the correct mask. You need a P3 mask. I believe that's what it is. Go check yourself. But you'd need that if you were cutting walnut. So, you know, I don't know, man. I think it's a great material. I like working with it. I think it machines really well. It cuts really well. And it holds its shape. It sprays really nicely if you get the right type. And you can use it in lots of different environments as long as you get the right one. But you would do that with timber anyway. You wouldn't go sit there and use oak outside because it's going to go black when it gets wet. If you can make something outside, you'd use cedar. So yeah, I think it's that simple. I think as a general rule, MDF is not bad. I think it is good. You just need to make sure you're using it in the right environment. So that's my hot take on it. I'm sure it'll wind no end of you up, but there you go. That's what it is. It's my opinion. Everybody has opinions. They're just like assholes. So you let me know below what you think. You have a great day. You be good. And you take it easy. All right? You have fun.